Captain Arenos Carlane backhanded the heretic with his massive armoured fist. Bone crunched under the blow, and the man was sent flying off the edge of the shrine with a thin scream. No sooner had the cultist's broken body plunged out of sight than a dozen more cultists scrambled out of the twisted ruin, clutching autoguns and snarling curses. In the fraction of a second it took for the heretics to raise their guns, Carlane's stormbolter roared to life. The two closest cultists were torn apart in thick sprays of gore as the bolt shells hit them. Undaunted by the fate of their comrades, the others sprayed a torrent of bullets at the captain. Without so much as flinching, Arenos thundered toward the deviants, rounds sparkling off his crimson Terminator armor. As he closed the distance, 3 more cultists were turned into showers of meat by concentrated stormbolter fire. A stride away from his foes, Carlane triggered his thunderhammer, a halo of crackling energy erupting around its blunt head. With brutal economy of motion, Arenos smashed apart the survivors, his hammer pulverizing the cultists in gushing explosions of blood, until only their mangled remains lay at his feet. Captain advanced into the ruined shrine, his weapon's power field hissing with evaporating blood. Once a place sacred to the Emperor, it had been defiled by the Xenos cult. Everywhere crude alien icons decorated the walls. Straining his enhanced senses, Carlane scanned the shadows and listened for any sign of the creature he sought. Then a faint creaking drew his attention, and his eyes drifted up until they fixed upon the shattered auto-pulpit above the altar of the Emperor. The tangled remains of the machine was moving. Something with too many arms was slowly untangling itself from the ruin of glass and steel. Carlane snapped up his stormbolter and squeezed the trigger, but the Broodlord was quicker. Like a bolt of lightning, the creature darted across the wall, the stone exploding in its wake as Carlane fired a long, continuous burst. It hit the floor only yards away, twisting out of Arenos' field of fire, before leaping across the room. As it sailed past the captain, one of its claws tore a ragged wound across his shoulder, ripping away ceramite and carving open flesh. But in that instant, Carlane's weapon struck the beast's side, spraying him in ichor.
Replacing the broiler.
The Broodlord hit the ground and turned, just as Carlane lowered his gun and fired, painting the altar with the remains of its head.
Oh, I'm attempt to do something.
Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baltimore, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and important faces of the Warhammer 40k setting, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. And today, we are to discuss one of the leaders of the Imperium, one of its paragons. But no backroom dealer and command tent lurker is Captain Carlane, as he is an Adeptus Astartes, a space marine of the highest order. For he leads one of the most devastating and courageous forces that the Emperor commands, the elite of the Sons of Sanguinius, the Blood Angels' own first company, the Archangels. So, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote Captain Arenos Carlane, no Space Marine earns the mantle of Captain of the Chapter's first company without the faith of his Chapter Master and the respect of his battle brothers. Captain Carlane has served the Blood Angels with distinction for over 4 centuries, ascending to the leadership of the Archangels after serving within the first company for over a century of war and carnage. In this time, he has gained the admiration of his peers and Commander Dante himself. Arenos Carlane possesses a keen tactical mind that has guided his brothers to victory time after time. It was this singular understanding of warfare that first drew the attentions of his company captain and Commander Dante. While all Space Marines undergo rigorous psycho-conditioning and constant tactical training, Arenos' abilities go beyond this. He is able to gain the measure of a conflict at a glance and formulate an effective response, often drawing from the ancient teachings of the Codex Astartes. As a young battle brother, Carlane first displayed his tactical acumen during the War of the Balestier 19 against the speed freaks of War Krugdak. When Carlane's sergeant was decapitated by an orc cannon, he assumed command of his squad. Using the world's sky bridge network as a battlefield, Carlane trapped the Xenos among the bridge's complex cogwork gates. Robbed of their mobility, the orcs became easy prey for the Space Marines. This action would be the first of many to draw the eye of Dante. More victories followed, and with each one Carlane's renown amongst the Blood Angels increased. When Aranos entered the ranks of the Archangels, it was as a veteran sergeant of a Terminator squad. The destruction of more than half a dozen Space Hulks can be laid at Aranos' feet, and since entering the Blood Angels' first company, he has led many of the missions to purge the Imperium of these insidious threats. Doom of Vorgoth, Divine Purgatory, and Twilight Aegis are names now synonymous with Carlane, the captain responsible for clearing these Space Hulks with only a handful of battle brothers. It was on the Doom of Vorgoth that Aranos was almost killed by the Necrogolem, a Nurgle demon of meat and metal. The vile creature had turned the Space Hulk into a playground of pestilence and disease, filled with myriad traps to snare the unwary. Carlane would eventually destroy the creature by venting its sump palace to the void and freezing the Necrogolem in a tomb of its own flesh. Captain Aranos Carlane wears a suit of ancient Terminator armor, a mark of his rank within the Archangels, and a reward for his unyielding loyalty to the chapter. Carlane's right eye has been replaced with an arco-bionic lens, a blessed relic of the chapter. The mechanical eye can see in multiple spectrums and has been slave to the target augers of Carlane's Stormbolter, allowing him to deliver accurate bursts of fire almost without aiming. Captain Carlane also wields the Hammer of Baal. Carlane's Thunderhammer is an ancient relic of the Blood Angels chapter, given to him by Dante as a mark of his honored place as captain of the Archangels. He also has the Aureat Halo. Carlane's Iron Halo is a relic of the Archangel's company armories and is known as the Aureat Halo. The halo is reputed to have been crafted during the Second Founding. End quote. Carlane. What a figure of a warrior, but also on the board. Simply magnificent. For Captain Carlane is a true son of the angel, and his advent spells the footstep of doom to any he is pointed at. And I chose that term with care, for where the archangels are sent, then there is no consideration for pity, restraint, or mercy. When the first company of the Blood Angels are unleashed on a target, then it is sure to be destroyed utterly. For of all the Space Marines that the Imperium has under its command, surely there are few indeed that can match the skill, power, and fury of the sons of the Great Angel when roused to war. Thus to be considered the best of that order is to stand amongst titans, to be a living legend that wields the power of old. And it was Carlane that was sent to the Shield Worlds to slow the advent of the Tyranids, as outlined in the expansion called Shield of Baal, a glorious box in its time, I can assure you, as I was playing both Blood Angels and Tyranids at the time. Wonderful. Alas, I have yet to read the full events of that confrontation, where the blood of Baal was all but spent, and the great devourer almost gained a fine repast indeed, that of Sanguinius himself. For his body resides on the chapter world of the Blood Angels, Baal. And one must wonder what horrors would have been unleashed upon the galaxy if the Tyranids were able to gain the genetic power of a Primarch, from which to use as a template for their biological weapons of war, their warrior beasts. So let us hope that the sons of Sanguinius can hold the line, and perhaps even push back the great devourer. As if they fail, not only will the entire Imperium Noctis fall, but soon thereafter, with the power of Sanguinius flowing through the veins of the Tyranids, surely so too would the entire galaxy. I have been Voldemort, your faithful servant. I hope you've enjoyed this brief introduction to Captain Carlane of the Blood Angels. If so, then please consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then also hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. Please also be aware that a quick share of the video goes a long way to the continuation of our little site and community. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make time for fun. Toodaloo. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Voldemort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace. There is only time for war. And today, we are to indulge in a few tales of that mighty legion and chapter known as the Blood Angels, both tracks from the 5th edition Blood Angels Codex. And despite this not being an entry covering a specific nuance of the setting, just presenting of a few of its most iconic tales, I feel it's still worthwhile in our exploration of the great grim darkness. Two short but corking little tales that I feel really show the epic struggles contained in this setting. I sincerely hope you agree. And so, let us hear the tales of the Blood of Kartas and the Battle of Antax as we usher in the weekend. To quote, Blood on Kartas. The Blood Angel strike cruiser Baal's Fist was returning from campaign in the Wotan sector when the distress call was received. The plaid Kartas was perhaps not the most resplendent jewel in the Imperium's crown. The wars of ruination a century earlier had left much of the Northern Hemisphere shattered and lifeless. But it was nonetheless too important a contributor to the Imperium's war material to leave at the mercy of pirates. Thus Captain Abel Zoriel ordered the Baal's Fist onto a new course in order to bring what aid he could to Kartas. Through luck or judgment, Baal's Fist emerged from warp space practically on top of the pirate fleet, its precise broadsides obliterating several escort craft before engaging the pirate's flagship, Slaughterer's Laughter. The pirate cruiser fared little better than its companions. Its weapon batteries were knocked out in the Blood Angel's first salvo, whilst the second all but crippled its engines. Bereft of all but the most feeble motive power, Slaughterer's Laughter was quickly captured by Kartas's gravity well. The pirate vessel tumbled incandescently through the atmosphere, finally slamming to a halt amid the ruins of one of Kartas's northern cities. Not wanting any surviving pirates to go to ground and thus return to bedevil Kartas later, Captain Zoriel led 3 squads of Blood Angels to the planet's surface. Alas, what seemed to be a simple seek and destroy mission would swiftly grow more serious. The Slaughterer's Laughter's warp drive had been heavily damaged, but not entirely destroyed. Though the colossal engine would never again move a vessel through the vagaries of warp space, some fluke of impact with the planet's surface brought them flickering to erratic and unstable life. Uncontrolled, the cascading energies tore a rent in the physical world, creating a pervasive portal to the dread demon lands of the realm of chaos. Zoriel had been correct in assuming that many of the Slaughterer's Laughter's crew had survived the crash, but none of them long survived the ebon blades of the demon host to burst through into the mortal world. Captain Zoriel's first hint that something was awry came swiftly afterward. An otherworldly storm sprang up as his 3 Storm-Raven gunships made their final approach to the crash site. The craft were buffeted by swirling winds and pounded by crimson lightning. One by one, thrusters screaming as they fought the unnatural weather, the Storm-Ravens fell from the sky. The surviving Blood Angels plied their way out of their stricken transports, to find themselves scattered and stranded in a ruined city crawling with cackling bloodletters. Bellowing to be heard above the swirling storm, Zoriel ordered his battle brothers to regroup within the comparative shelter of nearby ruins. As he did so, an ear-splitting howl went up all around, as the bloodletters noticed the fresh prey in their midst. Bolt guns roared as the Blood Angels fought their way to shelter, the raucous din momentarily drowning out the demonic cries. But then a monstrous bloodthirster dove out of the skies above, bellowing a challenge whose furious tones were clear even over the bolt gun's wrath. Zoriel's last stand. No mere bloodthirster was this, but Ka'Bandha, the first amongst Khorne's servants, an heir to power and stature easily thrice that of others of its kind. In times past, it was he who had crippled Sanguinius amongst the killing fields of Cygnus Prime. He who had single-handedly put the 9 worlds of Koros to the sword. In the final days of the Horus heresy, it was Ka'Bandha who had duelled Sanguinius before the Emperor's palace. The Primarch had bested the greater demon that day, breaking the monster's back and casting him lifeless to the ground. Yet Ka'Bandha was one of demon kind, and not even the blows of great Sanguinius could forever stay his wrath. In all the ages of the galaxy, no other creature had taken more skulls for the Blood God, or done so more joyfully. Ka'Bandha was death personified, yet Zoriel did not flinch. Shouting his own challenge, the captain charged into the fray. 2, perhaps 3 strikes did Zoriel land upon his bellowing adversary, but no more. The bloodthirster's axe, unholy runes glowing crimson, came down in one massive blow. Zoriel brought his own blade up to counter the strike, but Ka'Bandha's warp-forged axe was not to be thwarted by any mortal weapon, be it an honoured relic of the Blood Angels or no. Down drove the bloodthirster's axe, shattering the weapon that sought to prevent its passage, cleaving through Zoriel's armour and driving deep into his flesh. As the mortally wounded captain sank defenceless to his knees, Ka'Bandha stooped low over the fallen corpse. The bloodthirster reached out, a battalioned hand, and, with contemptuous ease, tore Zoriel's head from his shoulders. Roaring with victory, Ka'Bandha brandished his trophy high for a moment before lowering it into his fanged maw to crunch the skull with his enormous, monstrous teeth. With the fall of their captain, dismay threatened to steal over the surviving Blood Angels. If the mightiest of their number had done little save to slow the rampaging bloodthirster, what hope
basis
did
of the
they
armor,
have?
huh?
Heavy weaponry could perhaps be brought to bear against the brute, but already the Devastator's positions were overrun. The survivors engaged in brutal hand-to-hand combat up top a rampart formed from their slain battle brothers. Rescue was impossible, for the same demon storm that had grounded Zoriel's storm ravens would surely spell the doom of other craft. In such dire circumstances, lesser warriors would perhaps have ceded all hope. Yet these were space marines of the Blood Angels chapter, the sons of honoured Sanguinius. Their forebears had fought beside the Emperor in the very bleakest of days, and that memory was not theirs to dishonour. In an instant, the shadow passed from the hearts of the beset battle brothers, replaced by fresh determination. Bolt guns roared once again to size down fresh waves of bloodletters, and those Blood Angels already trapped in melee unleashed their own rage, summoning a battle fury that even the blood-slicked demons of the warp could not endure. Alas, this newfound defiance could not alter the course of the battle, only prolong it. The Blood Angels were few, whilst the demons were beyond counting, and ever reinforced through the warp portal fed by the Slaughterer's laughters and engines. Now Ka'Bandha, hungry to claim more skulls, sprang into the fray once more. Taking wing, the bloodthirster fixed his baleful attentions upon the site of greatest resistance, a handful of Blood Angels, whose defensive position amongst the tumbled ruin of an imperial shrine had, as yet, thwarted all assaults. Ka'Bandha rode his mighty wings ever higher through the demon storm, seeking to plunge down upon his prey. Yet at the apex of the bloodthirster's ascent, everything changed. A golden figure hurtled out of the heavens like a meteor, slamming into Ka'Bandha with bone-crushing force. The Sanguinor, legendary protector of the Blood Angels, had arrived. The angel and the demon. So furious was the Sanguinor's impact that not even Ka'Bandha's mighty wings could keep the bloodthirster skyborne. Angel and demon tumbled from the air and smote the ground with incredible force, their impact furrowing a fresh scar across the ruins. No sooner had the adversaries come to rest than their battle began in earnest. At first, it seemed a clash scarcely less uneven than the bloodthirster's previous duel. Kabanda had taken the brunt of the skyfall, his wings twisted and broken by the impact, fresh harms to join those wounds inflicted by Zoriel. But Kabanda was still a dread opponent, the most deadly of a savage breed. Beside the musculous might of Kabanda, the Sanguinor seemed insignificant. A candle flame threatened to be snuffed out by a tide of blood and darkness. Yet still, the winged warrior stood his ground, his golden armor shining bright. The Sanguinor was far swifter than his foe, gracefully evading each swing of Kabanda's rune axe, almost as if he knew every feat of which the beast was capable. For every blow thus evaded, the Sanguinor struck out in return, his blade biting deep into Kabanda's unholy flesh, the demon's dark ichor bubbling and steaming upon contact with the open air. Bellowing in rage and pain, Kabanda lashed out with his barbed whip. The coils closed around the Sanguinor's throat, finally pinioning the golden angel long enough for the bloodthirster to land a telling strike of his own. A thunderous axe blow that tore the Sanguinor free of the lash, while the force of impact caused the axe to shatter much as Zoriel's sword had before. Red-hot shards of the sundered axe flashed all around. The Sanguinor was sent crashing through a ferrocrete wall. Yet in moments, the golden angel was on his feet once more, his armor smouldering where the hell-forged axe had struck, but otherwise seemingly unharmed. Again, Kabanda's whip struck out, but this time the Sanguinor caught the tip in his gauntleted hand. Though he was driven to his knees by the impact, the Sanguinor struck out with his blade, severing the lash near to its haft. Riding the momentum of the blow, the Sanguinor threw himself forward, plunging his sword into Kabanda's chest with all the might at his command. Yet even this did not slay the demon, who merely roared anew and sent the Sanguinor sprawling with a contemptuous backhand blow. The combatants were now weaponless, the bloodthirster's axe in ruins, and Sanguinor's blade embedded in the demon's flesh. Both were worn and weary, the Sanguinor's light perhaps dimmer than it had been, Kabanda's massive frame oozing demon blood from scores of wounds. In a final desperate gambit, the Sanguinor triggered his jump pack, hurling himself at the bloodthirster once more, one hand closing around the hilt of his abandoned sword, the other finding purchase on the creature's brazen armor. Skywards did the Sanguinor take himself and his opponent, pushing his tortured jump pack to the limit, enduring Kabanda's bludgeoning blows as best he could. Higher and higher they flew, through the lightning and rage of the demon storm to where the air began to thin in gravity's weakening grasp. Only then did the Sanguinor release his hold upon the demon's armor, closing both hands around the hilt of his sword. The Sanguinor planted both feet firmly upon Kabanda's chest and pulled the ancient blade free. No longer held aloft by the efforts of the Sanguinor's jump pack, and his own wings rendered broken and useless from wounds, Kabanda plummeted from the heavens, speeding faster and faster as Kartas's gravity grasped him ever tighter. It is said that the sound of Kabanda's final craterous impact could be heard in every corner of the planet. His body broken beyond repair, Kabanda's spirit fled back to grovel before his unholy master's throne of skulls. Kabanda's blood was not the last that the Sanguinor's blade tasted that day. Sweeping low over the battlefield, he cast the tide of blood letters from his battle brothers. A small measure of respite gained, the Sanguinor roused the surviving blood angels to one last effort, his clarion tones redoubling their strength, his example reforging their purpose. Thus ennobled, the blood angels attacked once more, fighting their way to the wreckage of the downed cruiser whose misfiring warp drive had wrought their woes. A few well-placed melter bombs later, and the warp drive and the portal it had spawned were silenced forever. The demon storm had abated with Kabanda's death, and soon gunships descended from Baal's fist to retrieve the survivors and the slain. Of the 30 Space Marines who had made planfall on Kartas, only 6 would fight again. As for the Sanguinor, he vanished in the final moments of the battle, leaving as mysteriously as he had arrived. None amongst the survivors believed him to have been slain, though they had no tangible proof either way. It was to be many years before he was sighted again. Battle for Antax. Of all the planets in the Vidya sector that could have fallen into the hands of War Gut Stomper's mechs, Antax was about the worst. As one of the sector's principal forge worlds, Antax was an orc looter's wildest dream. Packed from Archaeotech vault to orbital station, with all manner of arcane technology, and of course, thousands of really big guns. Even accounting for the fact that a good proportion of the stolen weaponry would doubtless be destroyed through the traditional mech method of wiring different things together in order to see what would happen, Antax's fall was a disaster. The supply lines for hundreds of Imperial Guard regiments and a dozen Space Marine chapters were now cut, and those same weapons and tanks were certain to be used against their rightful recipients. So it was that, though his battle brothers were weary from their part in the battle against the Necron world engine, Captain Aphael of the Blood Angels turned his strike force aside from its homeward path and set course for beleaguered Antax. As the battle barge Blade of Vengeance and its strike cruiser escort arrived in orbit around the fallen Forge world, the scale of the battle quickly became apparent. The planet's outer atmosphere was choked with the blackened and twisted remains of countless space vessels, some doubtless the broken fragments of Antax's defense fleet, others unmistakably the burnt-out hulks of Orc craft. The wrecked green-skinned vessels vastly outnumbered those of the Adeptus Mechanicus fleet. Evidently, Antax's defenders had given a good account of themselves before they were overwhelmed. The only surviving Orc vessel appeared now to have landed, or possibly crashed, on the planet's surface, a short distance from the towering pinnacles of the Mechanicus Prime Forge. An obvious target, and one too good to be missed. In response to Aphael's commands, the Blade of Vengeance swung into a new orbit and unleashed a blistering bombardment that tore the grounded Orc vessel apart. The skies now belonged to the Blood Angels. The assault begins. Scarcely had the battle barge's guns fallen silent than Aphael assembled his senior sergeants and composed a plan of attack. No communications had been received to indicate the presence of Adeptus Mechanicus survivors on Antax, yet exterminatus could be considered only as a last resort. So great were the technological treasures housed within the Forge World's vaults. Thus the Orcs would have to be rooted out from the planet, though they numbered in their tens of thousands, and the Blood Angels were but a few hundred. Fortunately, the war had splintered. Scores upon scores of warbands roamed Antax's surface, searching for lootable technology. Only around the Prime Forge did a sizable horde remain. Against the smaller warbands, Aphael dispatched half of his battle brothers, organized into 5- and 10-man task forces, and supported by the strike force's Storm Raven gunships. Yet the real fight would occur in the shadow of the Prime Forge. The heavy Orc presence there suggested that either some of Antax's defenders still held out in that area, or that some particularly precious salvage could be found. Either way, further orbital bombardments could not be risked. The battle for Antax will now have to be fought eye to eye with the Orcs. Brooking no delay, Aphael and his remaining warriors began their drop pod assault, slamming into the Orc defences like thunderbolts from an angry sky. The orbital bombardment had ensured that the Orcs were not taken unawares by the Blood Angels' onslaught, but nor had they the chance to fully prepare for the descending assault. Only a handful of minutes had separated the last echoing barrage and the arrival of the first drop pod. Gutstomper had not even begun to beat some much-needed order into his lads when the first hatches slammed open and the volleys of bolt gunfire began to cut the greenskins down. Taking advantage of the confusion, the Blood Angels surged forwards across the broken flagstones and tumbled statues that surrounded the Prime Forge, bolt guns roaring as they drove the Orcs before them. Hundreds of Orcs fell to the fury of the Blood Angels in those first few moments of the battle, but now Gunstomper launched his counterattack. With a throaty rumble that made the battlefield tremble, the gates of the Prime Forge swung open and a tide of greenskins poured into the fray. Gutstomper himself led this fresh horde from the command deck of his custom battle wagon. Around the tank were the war boss's mega-armored bodyguards, huge brutes that strode unflinching into the hail of bolter fire. It was then that Aphael's plan threatened to come undone. Even as the fresh wave of Orcs charged forward, Squad Atrions succumbed to the red thirst. Overcome by bloodlust, the Devastators cast down their heavy bolters and charged headlong at the Orcs, only to be swallowed by the green tide. Aphael cursed silently to himself as his brothers fell. The loss of Squad Atrion's firepower could easily sway the course of battle. Worse, the captain could feel the red thirst calling to him also, its taste thick in his throat, the battle lust challenging his every action of restraint. Forcing back the demon in his blood through sheer force of will, Raphael shifted his forces to meet the new threat. Moment by moment, more battle brothers fell. Even though each claimed a score of orcs before succumbing to death or injury, the greenskins were many, and the space marines few. The piles of dead and wounded grew on both sides. But still, Gutstomper and his bodyguard came on, set to crush the upstart Blood Angel's captain who stood in his path. Fortunately, Raphael had one final weapon to call upon. The vengeance of the lost. On the eve of the struggle with the World Engine, near a dozen battle brothers had succumbed to the Black Rage, their rational minds subsumed by the horrors of Sanguinius's fall. In any other engagement, these lost Blood Angels would have formed the Strike Force's Death Company, spearheading Raphael's assaults. Yet the Blood Angels' part in the World Engine battle had been entirely spaceborne, and there had been no opportunity for the Death Company to earn glorious oblivion. Therefore, Raphael had ordered those afflicted to be placed in stasis, so their sacrifice could come at an hour when it was needed, and that hour had now come. Even before Raphael had left the battle barge, the sanguinary priest cracked the seals of the stasis chambers and performed the rites of renewal. The awoken Death Company were given over to the command of the Strike Force chaplains and taken aboard the Storm Raven Red Glory. They would not fight alone. As the sanguinary priests laboured to awaken the cursed living in the bowels of the Blade of Vengeance, the Tech Marines set their minds to the revival of one long dead, the mighty Death Company dreadnought, Moriah the Chosen. Whispering the hymnals of awakening and invigoration, the Tech Marines drove the fog of slumber from Moriah's crazed mind, girded his adamantium frame with weapons of war and the sacraments of sacrifice. When the Red Glory left the docking hangar, it did so with a full complement of Death Company aboard, and with Moriah securely grappled beneath its wings. The Red Glory struck without warning, speeding from the heavens like an angel of vengeance. On the gunship's first pass, twin missiles shot out from under its wings, contrails twisting lazily in the sky as they slammed into Gutstomper's battle wagon and blew it to flaming fragments, sending the furious warboss flying. On the second pass, the Storm Raven gunship turned the fury of its hurricane bolters and assault cannons onto the greenskin horde, mowing down orcs left and right before spurring out of range of retaliatory fire. On its third pass, the Red Glory's hatch burst open in mid-air. Moriah's grapples were released, and the Death Company hurled themselves into the fray. The Death Company were outnumbered, encircled, and had no hope of survival. But hope and survival were no longer concepts they understood. They hacked at the orcs with chainswords and combat blade, and when those weapons were lost or ruined, the Death Company tore at the greenskins with their gauntleted hands and bared teeth. Wounds that should have been fatal seemed only to slow the Death Company, and then never for long. Never before had these orcs fought a foe so reckless and furious, and they trampled one another in their attempt to escape the onset of the frenzied warriors whose armour was slick with the blood of the slain. For a moment, Gutstomper's mega-armoured bodyguard managed to halt the Death Company's advance. Not even the Blood Angel's rage-fueled strength could penetrate the knob's armoured hides. But then Moriah's adamantium bulk charged forward, smashing the knobs aside with mighty blows. Victim born of fury. As the Death Company tore the heart out of Gutstomper's counterattack, the remaining Blood Angels redoubled their efforts. With a roar, Raphael finally succumbed to the rising battle lust within his soul. Now was not the time for measured strategy, but for unbound rage. As the captain charged forward over the blood-slicked ground, other Blood Angels took up his battle cry. Rising up from their defensive positions, the sons of Sanguinius charged headlong at the beset orcs. Their inner rage now becoming a thing of strength, not weakness. Seeing his dreams of loot and conquest about to be drowned in gore, Gutstomper bellowed for reinforcements, but Raphael's other task forces had done their work well. Those orc warbands not already slain were fighting for their lives elsewhere, and the only boys Gutstomper could call upon were even now fighting and dying around him. By the time the warboss fell, torn apart by Moriah himself, the heart had long since gone out of his war. A scant hour later, with the red thirst slacked and the orc all but obliterated, the hunt for survivors began.
A wet brush and a wet palette.
Antax belonged to the Imperium once more. End. Quote, I hope you have enjoyed this presentation of two iconic battles of the Blood Angels. If so, then please do consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo. I am a captain, have fought for humanity for centuries, but had never wanted this, had never sought it. With the Tyranids, they killed so many of us on Baal. The flower of the chapters, the vast majority of their successors of the Legion of the Blood, were gone. Yes, we had new blood, new replacements, new Astartes, Primaris. But they were larger, different, from vast stasis crypts. They fought bravely, like sons of the Angel. They were faster than us, stronger, so sure of themselves, so effective. At first, I thought they were here to replace us. Shattered as we were, but with the word of the chapter master, Dante, and the avenging son of the Emperor, Rabut Gilliman himself to support them. They were Blood Angels now. But were they the Blood Angels now? And so it began, but had to be done swiftly. We integrated them, did so as fast as we could. But there was something that came out in the wash, in the observations, in the meetings, in the measuring. They were warriors born, well-equipped, hardened over the duration of a crusade. They were Marines. But they were missing something. They were not fighting at their potential, because they were walking Codex Astartes. They fought like Ultramarines. Not entirely, but far too much. So we taught them. But it was abundantly clear. They could not be given leadership positions in the highest tiers yet. One day, definitely, but not yet. They did not have the experience to command with the new tweaks to their doctrines. They were not yet adept at our way of war. So it was those of us that were left, those with the talent, if not the desire. We were promoted. There were so few of us left, you see, and I could not deny my duty any longer. So Rubrio Messaro became a lieutenant, and swiftly after a captain. I was there when my predecessor was cut down by the most horrific of battles I had ever yet witnessed. And today, I am reminded of it more than any before. Because today is a very special day. As our battle barge slows to approach the station, I am aware that everything will now change again. For with them amongst us, I can do naught but try even harder. None can bear to fail in their presence. But why does my mind wander so? Because I explain to myself, I justify why I, a captain of the blood, am secretly in more than a tiny bit of awe. And I hope it does not show to the men. I was promoted quickly to lieutenant, then a field promotion to captain only a decade later in that fateful event. So I had not been of high station for long, and the chapter had been at constant war, constant crusade, constantly moving, pushing out into the Imperium Nihilus, reclaiming worlds in the name of the Emperor and the Regent. Our own chapter master, Dante, had been named the regent of the entire northern half, the dark half of the Imperium. The pressure I can only imagine. We all now feel it slightly more, though, but not like normal men might. Not to the point where we can be paralyzed or become ill or inadequate. To the point where we all are more aware. No, we set a higher standard. We were the chapter, the Marines, the heralds and representatives of the Regent himself. We were his angels of death. We had to lead the way, not just to our successors, not just to the greater, wider brethren of all of the chapters in the northern half of the Imperium,
Probably change
to every
these to
guardsman, every
discovery.
tank column, every naval formation, every planet, every man, woman, and child under our aegis, our protection. We were now a symbol in the north, whereas the Ultramarines and others were the symbol in the southern greater Imperium. And we had to win. Always. Now more than ever. And it could be hard. But we were Astartes. All of us. Old and new. We stepped up. But due to my brevity of tenure, the inevitable had never happened until this day. Until this new briefing, this new quest. For it cannot be named anything other than that.
What,
And
Suno?
I'm nervous, if that word could actually be attributed to any of my kind. It is what I would call it anyway. But I am also filled with quiet joy. For what we have been tasked to do will require the best out of every one of my men.
Okay,
And me.
that's new.
And their mere presence will bring it in abundance. For on that base is a full squad of them. The legends. The heroes of our chapter. The sanguinary
I
guard.
mean, that makes sense.
Each one a fabled warrior, the very cream of not only the chapter, but of its most illustrious, most
Did you
skilled,
save an
most
option?
powerful veterans. And then the blood runs so pure. The resonance of the angel's soul reflects so brightly. I've only witnessed them in battle but once. The reason for all of my explanation of my unwanted yet meteoric promotion. I had never had them attached to my units before, let alone attached to me. But now we were approaching, but never planning to stop. The Storm Raven and its escorting storm talents were the only things in the void between us and the station. Replacement for losses we had sustained on campaign, prioritized to us due to the import of our mission. But it was the Storm Raven we all watched, even I. All my brethren bar the lieutenants and I had their helms on. They could mask their awe. We could not. Discipline. The Raven lands, they walk down out of it. Each moving so smoothly, they seem more to glide than walk. Yet it is not ephemeral or feminine. It is more like a hovering forwards, not like ghosts, but like that which they are. Beautiful but powerful warrior angels. Their golden armor shines, and their masks, those metal death masks that burn with the light of the Emperor, the light of the angel. They are resplendent. Everything we feel we should all aspire to be. But they are also the most deadly of all of us. The most powerful Astartes the Emperor commands outside of the Grey Knights, some say. And today, I believe it. I believe. And they are here to guard me, to protect me, as captain, both physically, morally, and with the priesthood, spiritually. Their example alone, their presence amongst the men, the army, the company, it will show all of the brethren that we are in the right, that we are righteous. For how could such as they fight for anything other than the most pure of causes, the most noble of quests and goals? And everywhere we go, the men and women of the Imperium, from the meanest hiver to the most exalted planetary governor, will know that they are blessed, for the truest sons of the angel are with them. They stand forward and take their oaths to defend me for the duration of this campaign, and all cheer when it is done. They cheer. Something I have not heard in many a long month and year. Already, their glory, their presence, begins to shine through us all. With them with us, with me, we cannot fail. We cannot. For we go to a crux point in the schemes of time, I am told. One of the great battles that defines the future, the path of the galaxy itself. Not forever, of course, but for a time. A crux point at which the blood angels must be present, or all is lost. Kobulu himself has foreseen it. And now, for the first time since I received these orders, now I feel we may just win. Because the chapter ancient of the Sanguinary Guard has in his hands, towering over all of us, filling us all with even greater pride, he has a sign. He carries a banner from the Arks, sent by the Regent himself. we will go to war under the banner of the chapter of the Blood Angels entire. We will not lose. To be continued. And don't worry, we shall see them in action stories soon enough. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Voldemort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and important units of the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. And today, as we come closer to the Sanguinala, I thought it only appropriate that we cover one of the most loved units in the entire setting, the Sanguinary Guard. They are adored by many fans who are not even Blood Angel players or enthusiasts unto themselves. So glorious are they. Counted as some of the most romantically dramatic and visually dazzling of all of the units in the game, their models are sumptuous and their lore sublime. And so, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote, the Sanguinary Guard, exemplars of the host. Though the Blood Angels and their successors are haunted by the death of Sanguinius, they nonetheless embody the great virtues of their angelic Primarch, and they seek to emulate his example wherever and whenever they can. Some brothers achieve this to a greater standard than others. The Sanguinary Guard trace their heritage back to the Great Crusade, when they served as bodyguards to Sanguinius himself. Since that time, every Blood Angel's successor chapter has had a formation of these warriors, as directed by Askelon, the leader of their noble order at the time of the region's dissolution. As the Sanguinary Guard are ancient, so too is their war gear. They can trace the lineage of their golden armor and wrist-mounted Angelus bolt guns to the time of the Horus heresy. It is no different for the mighty incarmine glaives they wield, which cannot be scratched, warped, or broken, no matter how terrible the violence wrought by or against them. Made of angel steel, the secrets of the forging of these beautiful and deadly swords and axes are known only to the Blood Angels' artificers. A Sanguinary Guard's most iconic item of war gear is their death mask. The stern-faced visages of these golden war helms crackle with halos of light, giving the masks a terrifying aura that panics the foe and can even put them to flight. The machine spirit within each mask forms a bond of unbreakable loyalty with the wearer, and should the Sanguinary Guard fall in battle, his mask is placed in the sarcophagus of sorrows on Baal for 7 days and 7 nights, in which time the mask takes on the stylized features of its former wearer. Together, the Sanguinary Guard's war gear is a reminder of the chapter and the Imperium's great history. The deeds of each Sanguinary Guard are recorded with great assiduousness, and recited during the sacred rites, chapter celebrations, and on feast days. They speak of Uzarael, who swept Ansor III's skies of winged Drukhari warriors in a night and a day, and Vesta, who purged the leaders of the cult of the Bloody Eyes from Vladzig Prime with flame and axe. Accounts are read of Martanio, who slew the bodyguard of the Necron overlord Anok the Gilded, before beheading the megalomaniacal Xenos leader, and countless more tales of glory that ensure that every brother who ascends to the ranks of the Sanguinary Guard knows he is joining a valorous brotherhood with a most glorious legacy. The Sanguinary Ancient. Chosen before the commencement of each conflict by a council of peers, one amongst the Sanguinary Guard may be given the honor of bearing their chapter standard into battle. It is only during times of greatest need that such a banner is released from the Arx Angelicum, for these magnificently crafted relics are links to the chapter's oldest days, and some were born to war during the Great Crusade itself. Yet the vision of a golden angel soaring into battle with the storied banner of the Blood Angels held high can inspire fervor beyond words in the warriors of the Imperium, and transform even the direst rout into glorious victory against the odds. End quote. Quotations taken from Blood Angels Codex Supplement 9th edition, an ancient quote from 8th edition Codex. The sanguinary guard epitomize everything that the noble angel, their Primarch Sanguinius, brought to his sons on his discovery by the Great Crusade. Where the Death Company are its dark curse, its rage, and the epitome of what they were before he came. Aggressive, bloody, called the Eaters of the Dead. The sanguinary guard are his purifying light. For the great angel and all of his blood are a complex mixture of heaven and hell, angel and demon. And in this bard's opinion, his was one of the most mighty and most important of all places and reasons for existing. The most symbolic, and by far the most potent, the most pregnant with meaning, with hope. But I shall perform an entry closer to the time to explore these themes. The importance of Sanguinius, how terrible the loss of this son, and what his sacrifice meant to the Emperor, history, and humanity, and why it is one of the few almost universal celebrations across the entire Imperium. As to the Guard themselves, not just what they stand for. They are said to be so profoundly gifted, so intensely steeled, so sublimely skilled, that they are to the ordinary Astartes, as the Astartes is to the humble guardsman. For it is true that the scions of Sanguinius are inarguably some of the mightiest of all Astartes, as their father was unto his brothers. Not all by any stretch of the imagination, but those that do exemplify his gifts are truly some of the best the Emperor commands, the best warriors that humanity has ever seen since the time our ancestors took up the first tools. They are graceful and elegant, yet without hesitation. They are the wing dipped not in blood, as are the Death Company, but in light. They dazzle their enemy and daze them, but not only by the spectral aura that beams from them, but with their very craft, their skill. Their mere presence raises all around them up, and gains from them the very best, the bravery inherent in all of our kind, in all of humanity. Their history we shall get into in more detail in another entry, when we deal with the secret of the Blood Angels, the being that protects them, guides them, and raises them up when even these stalwart exemplars of humanity are in danger of failing. For very soon we shall discuss not only the Sanguinala, but also the Sanguinor, and I hope you will join me then. And my last parting point, they, the Sanguinary Guard, are one of the most likely reasons for the popularity of the Blood Angels figures line, as compelling a reason to collect them, if not more than just their sumptuous lore. The figures for this legion, this chapter, this army are so good, just gorgeous, glorious, and utterly lethal. And in the Sanguinary Guard, you can see some of the very greatest art that is available in figure form from the Games Workshop. I have been Voldemort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed this brief introduction to the Sanguinary Guard. If so, then please do consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Voldemort, your faithful servant. Here is a compilation of one of the ongoing plot lines of my fan fictions that are used to explore and demonstrate the setting of Warhammer 40k, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. Many an entry is the result of a vote, as I will leave them on a cliffhanger, and then get the gentle listeners to forge the narrative by voting in the comments, so they can control the direction and events of the story. So if you enjoy any of these stories, then do watch the weekly entries on the guides, and prepare to exert your own influence and vote on the storylines. Now, I very much hope you enjoy the following compilation, a lead-up to my campaign at Abundance Tertius. We are beings of anger. We were designed this way, forged this way, by our history or lineage, by the choice of others, by the will of the Emperor, with the agreement of his Son, the Angel, our Father. For anger is necessary, and we have so many layers, built one upon the other, stacked like bricks to form a mighty tower of our rage, our fury. It starts at our birth and continues to grow more calcified with each year, each stage. It is our armor, and it is our spur. It is our weapon, and it is our curse. Sometimes I remember the tapestry of my life, intertwined in ways that did not happen, could not happen. My dreams are a struggle sometimes. At others they are a clear pathway, a straight road, but always vivid and potent. I find it difficult to sleep outside my sarcophagus. I find it impossible not to dream when within it. I am not strange amongst my kind in this regard. This harkens back to the first time, of course. For us, it all begins in the sarcophagus. Our new bodies, our new lives, our new dreams, our new duty. For I am a son of Sanguinius, and his blood flows through my veins. I am an Astartes of the Blood Angels. My dreams often take me back to that moment, the moment I knew I would be a Blood Angel, or that I would die trying to become one. The moment my brother died. It all happened so quickly. We were stood atop one of the many crags of our red world, up high to see our prey. Alas, as I leaned forward, I slipped. I should have plunged to my death, down into the red sands hundreds of meters below. Instead, Lucas' face passed mine, as he leapt and grabbed at me and hauled me back to safety. But in this he overbalanced, teetering at the edge on his tiptoes before failing his battle with gravity and plunging over the edge himself. I scrabbled forward only to watch his face get smaller as his arms fumbled in the air. But he did not thrash. His face was almost calm, placid. He made a choice, but he was at peace with his decision. It was Lucas' wish, always his greatest dream, to be one of the Sky Warriors. He would not go a day without proclaiming it.
Leg.
So bold
George
was he
kind of listening,
that soon none doubted it.
Yeah, so you're listening to
The
some
day of his
Blood
sacrifice
Angels lore.
was the day the Sky Chariots proclaimed the time of challenge had come,
I paint Blood Angels.
and the pilgrimages to Angel's Fall would begin. The irony. I told my father of the events of the day, and packed only that which I would need to travel the Rad Deserts to Angel's Fall. My mother was silent. My father merely nodded his agreement. The dream had to be made real if Lucas' memory was to be upheld. He understood. Despite me only being a boy, he understood. Those days were hard. I was scrawny, yet strong, but burned and blackened by the sun and the sand. I was only barely recognizable as human then. The trials were unlike anything I had ever experienced. So bloody, so brutal, so uncompromising. A mere 50 of us were chosen, out of all of the hundreds who came, of those who survived those bloody days. But the fire of Luca was with me. I had somehow caught it when he grabbed me, when he saved me. His fire passed to me. His anger joined my own, and it burned all at which we threw it. It is how we passed the trials against those larger or faster, those older or stronger. We beat them down with our joined rage. More and more trials and tests continued within the fortress of the Blood Angels. We were all agog at the magic of the chapter then, being little more than feral nomadic plains people. But we were not given time to ponder. The training was intense and often deadly.
Wrong brush.
All the while we, the denizens of Baal, were small and often misshapen, pocked or afflicted by the horrors of existence on Baal. Yet the trainers were all statuesque, chiseled demigods, who seemed like animated marble masterpieces. They were so noble of bearing, so handsome, so perfect.
With 9 came.
None of us aspirants could understand how we would turn into things such as they. But eventually we learned.
Yep.
The final stage that triggered our gene seed would be the last and most daunting trial. For we would all be injected with the blood of the Primarch Sanguinius, and then placed in life-supporting sarcophagi for a full year to permit the change to take effect. As stated, I was scrawny and misshapen, as were we all, so you can imagine the changes were drastic, took time, and were excruciating. Our bodies were changed slowly over that year.
Yeah.
Our bones lengthened, our muscle mass exploded, our skins became calm and clear, and our very facial structures altered. Endless months of slow agony and endless screaming. The kind of screaming that makes your throat and even lungs burn, and your head feels it is about to burst through the lava-hot sensation being channeled to it by the nerves. Such pain, without escape. But the pain was not the only bedfellow locked into our sarcophagi with us. There were the dreams. Dreams of beauty, worlds so various and splendid that it strikes one dumb. Visions of the crusade, and the angel himself, our father, Sanguinius. Nightmares of betrayal and siege and final failure, of battle and of death. For with the blood and its changing ways, also come the memories of our Primarch Sanguinius, his struggles, his joys, his victories, and his final death at the hands of the arch-traitor, Horus Lupercal. The images, the dreams, the memories, the pain, the change, the year, locked away. You go through the midst of madness, its deepest, darkest well, only then to rise and go through to the other side. All the while the angel is there. From the second the blood is transmitted, he is there. For it is the angel, his memory, his spirit, that meets us at the end of this journey, welcomes us back to the light of sanity, oft just before the sarcophagus is opened. Not all survive the ordeal. Many an aspirant has passed their last seconds enclosed in the sarcophagus. None have ever gone through the experience easily. All have, at least once in all of that time, wished for it to be over, irrespective of how. When that lid is finally lifted, slid off by a coterie of sanguinary priests, what comes out does not even mildly resemble that which went in, either physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. When I awoke, I was calm, and greeted those who exhumed me as brothers. I soon looked upon my new visage, the perfect form, the incredible height and power, the clear skin, the golden hair. Yet my mind had changed as much as my body. My interior now matched my exterior. In every single way, I had been born anew. Few talk of it, few acknowledge it. The rage inside that box, not just due to the inherited feelings of our gene father, not only due to the curse of our seed and the subsequent curse from the forces of the enemy, no. Also simply by being locked in a box and left in agony for a year, being shut away in the dark with nothing but pain and majesty. Like a thousand-folded blade, these layers of anger were not only added, but hardened, forged into our very souls. Our life had been pain, our emperor had been betrayed, and our father slain. The bright dream of a utopia stolen, the knowledge that the people of Baal were left in our misery just to provide better candidates, the knowledge that we would know no other joy than to fight and then die for the emperor, our people, and our chapter. We sacrifice our humanity, our place amongst our people, for one reason alone. to defend them. Rage. We are the directed
Yeah, it's
rage
pretty
of
good,
a
isn't it?
father betrayed, the angel slain, a dream destroyed, a people in danger. I, Rubio Misaro, captain of the Blood Angels, a true son of Sanguinius, will never cease in my vigil. Nor would any of my brethren Astartes of the Blood Angels.
For
For
Oblivion?
without us, without the Blood Angels, without our constant vigil, without our constant war, without our constant rage, surely Imperium Nihilus, nearly a full half of the Imperium of Man, would fall. The captain passed his blood-red helm to his subordinate and began to slowly trudge down the hill alone. His footfalls were heavy and his shoulders down. He looked at points as if he would fall to one side or the other. So ungainly was his stagger down that hill, toward the place he never thought he would stand, to the place he never wanted to be, to her dead body. As he approached, he felt all of the weight of the years on his shoulders. Every last decade, every last second of his long, long life felt like a mountain on his back this day. He looked at anything but her. His pauldrons with the blood-red tears on them, his mighty gloves, one being a power fist, to the sky above, covered in pillars of smoke from lingering fires as it was, but calm and tranquil. It only made things worse. He had not been able to do it, even after Baal. The disconnect to reality was too stark. The skies filling with Xenos of a blinding array. Not when they hit and so many of his brothers died. Not then. Why now? He did not know, and he did not want to know. The grinding emptiness of chairs around tables. Names ceremoniously erased from lockers. The list of his brethren who would never raise bolter or chainsword in the name of the Angel and the Imperium again. He had witnessed it all, understood it all, accepted it all. But this was the final straw. The day he never thought he would see. The day he never imagined would come. And the floodgates opened. Centuries of conflict and madness and battle and loss now overwhelmed him. The lone armored man approached his destination, and like a martinet with its strings cut, he toppled forward onto his knees. Like all vitality had been removed from him, washed away by the outpouring of grief. He could walk no further now that he could see her, now that he could not avoid seeing her, as he rested his head against her cold form, now that he could not avoid seeing what they had done to her. And it began, quietly at first, tears began to leak, then more and more like a river. His breathing escaped his control, and came in shudders, as he opened his arms to place his open palms on her, as he tried to hug her with all of his remaining might. She was gone. He began to whisper, knowing she would never answer him, never show sign of life again. Do you remember how we met? That day on the flight deck, preparing for the drop, and you would not let me aboard. Not until I had proven myself to you. The others laughed so hard at me. I admit, I started embarrassed and then turned angry, but you always knew how to make me laugh in the end. How long we played together, until the final klaxon went off. Our first campaign. Barely knew my bolter from my braces then. How many times did you save me just in that one campaign? And every campaign since. It's why I refused promotion or transfer time and again, old girl. so I could be with you. But Baal changed everything. You have to know that. There were simply so few of us left that I had no choice. If the decision led to this, then I swear I will hate every day I have to wear the mantle of captain. I wish you could hear me and tell me it isn't so. Some sign. Anything. You turned the tide again, old girl. Like so many times before. You turned the tide. We're on our knees. But you came, unbidden, but you came, as always. We were pinned down and our attack had faltered. Decapitating strike turned into a pitched battle. I underestimated their will. We were low on ammunition, and you came. I know it was you who led the rest, despite being left behind. We thought we were protecting you, but should have known you'd not be left out. Not while we were dying. If you had not hit that flank, girl, we could have been wiped out. So many of my brothers lived to date because of you, girl. But why did you then do it? Why take on the night? Why take on the night? Why? We were saved, and you could have taken us out of there. I know you could have seen things better than us, knew what was happening better than us, with your eyes. But why? A glorious kill, old girl. But the cost was too high. Too high. Look what they have done to you. The warrior pushed his head up against the metal sides of what remained of a thing that had fought with his chapter from before the angel himself was found during the Great Crusade. The mangled and melted wreckage of the mutilated Land Raider still smoked, but no spark, no light, no single sign of activity, of life, came from what remained. And he wept, like he had not been allowed, permitted, or felt possible to weep for centuries. She was gone. I will miss you, girl, so much. Captain Rubio Massaro stood from his place next to an ancient and now wrecked Land Raider, his countenance somber, his bearing regal, as he proceeded to rejoin his men waiting quietly at the edge of the bowl. He looked each man in the eye as he spoke. Now we finish this. We take our wrath to the very heart of this incursion, this invasion. We strike at the dragon in his lair. There was no cheer from his gathered marines. There were but stoic nods of assent. Hours passed, and the battle had been intense, the marines pushing further and further into a last conurbation that had not been purified and pacified. Heading towards the center of the disruption, the thing that had caused so many forces of the Dark Powers to its cancerous collapsion. Yet the enemy would not go down so easily. Demons streamed towards the Blood Angels' ranks despite all the pinpoint accuracy of their bolt shots culling the throng. Yet still they would hit. Unlike many other chapters, other legions, who would perhaps fall back in orderly squads or stand their ground and fire until they had no further choice, not the sons of Sanguinius. The Blood Angels countercharged. A tactical squad, no chainsaws or jump packs, they charged nonetheless. Using their bolters as precise bludgeons and all of the strength of their armor and skill, they fought forward. The red demons in front of them met them with all of the force and rage of an ocean. Yet, they fell back under the punishment these red-clad marines were dishing out to them. Every sword swing parried, every barb blocked, with counterstrikes that destroyed the beings first time, every time. But they were just the wake, not the prow. At the tip of the V, the top of their spear point, was Captain Rubio. With his power sword crackling blue energy and his Infernus pistol blazing, Captain Rubio Massaro strode forward, never missing a step, never slowing, never relenting. Like a god of war, he felled all before him. In the center of it all, his rhythm set his mind blank. The captain heard what at first seemed like the beginnings of an auditory hallucination, but then it became clearer. A voice in his mind, one he had never heard before, yet recognized immediately. My curse grows within you all. One day, I will have you all. One day you will be lost within your rage so much that you walk into my realm, from which you will never escape. One day the Blood Angels will fight for the Blood God. One day the Blood Angels will collect skulls for the Skull Throne. Give in. Be the first. But you will not be alone, for every one of your brothers will join you in their trickles and in their droves. My curse grows within you. Be the first, and you will be the mightiest. Can you hear me when I think, while I destroy your minions? As you hear, so are you heard. Then I shall give my response. How dare you? How dare you put out such a fetid fare as if it were a banquet? Before you stands a son of the angel, a son of Sanguinius, and I know thee. Cabanda, proclaimed minion servant Lickspittle of Corn. Yea, but Lickspittle is too high an epithet for thee. You are an echo of an echo. You are nothing. I shall explain it to thee once alone. For there is something you cannot understand, cannot fathom, cannot grasp. Not if I gave you all of the experiences, the lives, the achievements, the senses of every being who ever lived. From the first sea beings who gazed up into the first sun, to the final sentients that will witness the last star burn cold. Not if I gave you 1,000,000 lifetimes to ponder these experiences. Not if I gave you until the end of time could you possibly understand. You think yourself a mighty demon prince, yet I know thee for what thou art. You protest of power and infallibility, but if that were so, why hound my door with your begging bowl for supplication and service? I know you to be an echo of an echo, a dream of a being that calls itself a god, but in reality it is nothing more than a collection of the misery of everyone's bad days. We have something you will never experience, never possess. We are the sons of the angels, aye, the sons of the Emperor's design. Despite having greatness running through our veins, we are but human. And we have something you will never, ever have. A choice. So I say to thee and your master and all of the cohorts of his minions, I say it but once and once alone. For now and for all time. Get ye hence. Take thyself from my door, demon. For I choose to be a true son of the angel, and I will never bow to the likes of thee. And come what may, I am at peace with this decision. The Storm Raven hurtled through the skies towards its target like a lightning bolt, through fields of fire, flak and small arms aimed up at it. Most was evaded by the furious action of the incredibly skilled pilot. He was used to the task, delivering his fallen brothers to the very center of the fray, its very heart. But he always kept the comms from the central section turned off. On his first drop, he had kept them on. But the lesson hadn't been learned. Oh, how it had been learned. For he had heard what they said. He heard what was being spat at them by the legendary Lemartes, guardian of the lost. And on that day, He near lost the command of his faculties. He nearly fell into the chasm that was the rage. Now he thought only on his task, had to concentrate on this one moment, for even the memory of those words would threaten his soul again. Inside the main compartment of the specially altered assault vessel, the same thing was happening, as it always did when it was deployed. Le Martis was with his brothers of the Death Company. He was whipping them into a froth of rage that would make even a cornate berserker take pause. The forces of our enemy, the great betrayer, await us, brothers. We have but moments before we are unleashed. Remember the faces of the foes you slay today. Remember when you strike what they have done. They have betrayed the Emperor. They have betrayed the Crusade. They have betrayed humanity. These lapdogs and lickspittles of Horus and his vile ilk, these traitors, deserve the fullest extent of our wrath. The sons of the Angel, the sons of the Emperor. These vile curs are without honor, without courage, without virtue, without glory, without any redeeming feature. For they are the basest of all things. They are vile and deserve our righteous fury. They deserve the cut of our chainswords, the blessing of our bolters. They deserve to be crushed underfoot, and we shall give it to them, for they are the most despicable thing ever to arise from the human race. They are traitors. They betrayed our Lord, the Angel. They betray our Master, the Emperor. They betray our entire race. They cavort there beneath the very walls of the Imperial Palace, looking for a way in, looking to slay and slaughter our brothers who guard that mighty and hallowed wall. They look to lay their rough and unclean hands on the Emperor himself. Shall we allow this? Do we permit these vile scum to bray and bluster at our very walls? Do we allow them their nefarious scheme? Do we allow them to defile the halls of the Emperor? Do we allow them to hack and claw and spit on our very Primarch, our father, on Sanguinius himself? Do we allow them to trample his image, to wipe their boots on his wings? Do we allow them to defecate on his body? Do we allow them to then slay our Emperor? Do we? Then buckle your bolters and let rip thy swords and chain thy fury, thy wrath, for this day we will destroy the traitors. The cabin hummed with the whir of chainswords as the light turned green at the hatch and it was swiftly thrown open. Some 50 feet beneath were densely packed a veritable sea of enemies. None wore the power armor of the named traitors, none the emblems of chaos, but to the men who jumped from the Storm Raven right into their midst, there was nothing but the images of the sons of Horus overlaid onto their true visage. As the Death Company carved a bloody path through their opposition, their arms moving faster than was deemed possible by their foe, wounds that would have killed even Astartes, severed limbs, broken bones, did nothing but fuel their rage. Nothing stopped them as they carved through the madness-induced illusions of what they now saw as the traitor mass, forms that would soon all be dead, as the wrath of the Death Company chewed through their ranks like whirlwinds of unstoppable rage. It had been hard fighting, and it had been long. This site, this mausoleum to martyrdom, was where they had drawn a line in the sand, had decided to make their stand. Where once they capered and rutted, where they performed their debased hedonistic foulness. Now this is where they fought for their God, they fought for their lives. This is where they beseeched their foul master, and their throats ran hoarse from the screaming of its name. But this was where the Angels of Midnight had also decided to end the matter. And it was going apace, as intended, to schedule. But that was the lie. The patterns of madness that allowed these angels to justify what they were doing. For there could be no other word for it than extermination. From the one perspective, the side of the people of Isokarian Alpha, this was unjustified slaughter. They had been alone. They had been cut off from the rest of the distant Imperium. They had been beset for months, tortured and hunted and destroyed. Their city smashed, their entire people on the brink.
Yeah,
So when the great tear across reality had opened, the lights went out. And the Xenos, aliens, had swept in where the Imperium was napping, and they had harvested humans like cattle on this world. They had swept across the world and killed or harvested all, before then mustering just outside of the range of the last remaining human weapons of any note, just outside of their main capital. And to the Xenos it had been more a celebration, a gathering for a festival before their attack. They had been so certain of victory that they celebrated it before the deed was even done. But none who huddled in that last city could see any way that they would fail. They had little in the way of defenses, few tanks or materials of war remaining, and nothing they had done before had availed them any good. The Xenos had been too much for them even when they could field entire regiments of planetary defense forces. But on that last day, when only this, the capital, survived, it was then that the people of Isokarian were saved. In their darkest hour, on the very dawn of what considered most to be their last day, their deliverance had come. For storms had arrived out of nowhere as the enemies gathered around for their last assault. Those storms covered all before and around the city, the last human sanctuary on all of Isokarian. They raged for 6 days and 6 nights.
Oh man, look at the
And when they
vibes,
abated, when their fury was
look at
finally
the
blown
vibes,
out,
great.
the Xenos were gone.
Yeah.
All were scoured from the planet. All. The people of Isokarian were then informed, instructed, instilled with the faith of the being who had saved them. And it was not the
Well, they fixed that
Emperor.
country.
Some of the new priests stated it was the Prince of Pleasure, Slanesh. He'd been contacted by a single man, one who would later be made king in all but name. This man had prayed for his entire world, his
All the
entire
fucking
people.
Zooms are bad.
He had prayed for
Sorry,
deliverance, and they had received
Exactly.
it.
Probably.
At first, the rites and
It's all
ways
the way
of
from-
worshipping their new
Yes.
god seemed a massive festival, a carnival of colours and music and song. For their new lord, their new protector, he was unlike the dour emperor of mankind. He was a lord of life, and love, and laughter, and he celebrated them all to abundance. Yet as time went on, as it always does, the rites became more involved, less structured, more bacchanal, more extreme. And as the years passed, hedonism and debauchery became the norm. The cavorting couplings went from private affairs to writhing carpets of sweaty grunting, animalistic rutting across every road and alleyway on high days. The gutters running with blood, when the sunset and a red moon leered down on the horrors they performed upon one another in the name of their dark benefactor.
Figure out what to do next, guys.
And none saw how far they had fallen, how far they had stooped, until they were confronted by the returning extended family of humanity, who were, quite rightly, utterly repulsed. And they saw in one brief look that the people had turned to chaos. From the perspective of the Imperium, the world had been left to its own devices, left to look to its own defenses, because there was simply no way to get to them in time. The warp routes had been cut off, the galaxy darkened for a time, and when the lights went back on, communications were possible again. Then the galaxy was ablaze. Worlds uncounted had been attacked, entire sectors had been ravaged, and in that time it was only those worlds that kept beaming out their distress cores that were placed on priority. as they were the only worlds that the overstretched forces of the Imperium could guarantee still had any populace left to defend. So Issacharion was presumed lost.
Wet.
And when the combined force led by the Angels of Midnight reached the world, they had expected to drop off the contents of a colony ship and move on. But instead, they found that the world had not been washed clean of humanity. Quite the opposite. It had been contaminated by them and their twisted heretical beliefs. The deliberation was less than a heartbeat in coming to a decision. And so, Issacharion Alpha was then beset by an almost identical event, so similar in nearly every way. The forces of the Imperium hit, and hit hard. They set about scouring all human life from the globe. And it was, again, their capital alone that held out. Or at least, it did. Now it was on the verge of its final destruction. For the commandment of the chapter master of the Angels of Midnight had been as predictable as it was complete. All human life on Issacharion was to be wiped out. Of course, but this place, the seat of power, was to be flattened and the ground salted and glassed. But as with everything the Angels of Midnight did, it would be thorough. They had to make sure that every single last Chaos worshipper was dealt with before they took to orbit again and laid it waste. Every single last one purged in the name of their father, the Angel. Forever was the Angel known to give warning, then, if ignored, to lay utter waste to any who denied the power and righteousness of their cause. And thus did his sons, the Angels of Midnight, set about their bloody task. The poor defenseless people of Issacharion were not to be underestimated, however. Or more to put it, their Dark Lord and Master was not. For as they marched into the place after the guard had shelled it for a week without break, the Chaos forces had twisted many a normal human cultist into a travesty. Creatures came charging out of every angle, what were once human. Now all were writhing, screaming things of flesh, horrors to be put down. And in these engagements, the Bolter had, as always, reigned supreme. Yet it was when they came closer to the center of the place that things got worse. For as a last resort, a desperate gamble, the people there had sacrificed a huge proportion of their remaining number in the most terrible ceremonies any had yet performed. But the Angels of Midnight were ready. Their deep midnight blue power armor was no longer proof to every attack from the resisting cultists, no. For now death stalked the city in the form of the Neverborn as well. Creatures of the warp permitted to gain entrance to the material world by this dark ritual. The tactical squad had moved forward, thrusting into this last seat of impurity along with the rest of their company. The sergeant finished scanning around him and ducked down behind the wrecked walls again, between the howls of pain and pleasure that echoed around the entire landscape. There had been deeper rumblings. Something big was on its way. But it was not demonic. It was a very old, battered and barely serviceable demon rust tank. Behind it crept entire walls of twisted scum. For its lack of sheen and polish, the battle cannon on its top was no less lethal, no less destructive. Far from its one large gun barked out, and removed much of the cover that it was pointed at. The sergeant knew his men could handle the hordes of scum, knew they would finish them all eventually, be it by bolter or by fist if necessary. But here in the silken darkness was where the Angels of Midnight had learned to be lords, fighting their twisted brothers of the night for centuries uncounted on a world cut off by the murder storm. They had learned all right. Now they were the kind of terror that usually found itself in the clutches of the vile ones, the corrupting powers. But despite this unceasing hell that they had lived in, they had never broken, had never devolved, never become creatures of unreasoning slaughter, or so most believed. Their millennia-long isolation by warp storm, cleared by the tear across the galaxy, But when they were found by the indomitous crusade, they were nearly wiped out themselves, until their true nature was discerned. For they appeared so much like those that they had learned to fight, the masters of the shadows. No Raven Guard were they, certainly, but of all of the sons of Sanguinius, they were those who dwelt in shadows, gained strength from its dark embrace, and they had been absorbed into the crusade, brought back into the Imperium proper, given new Primaris Marines and equipment enough to return them to a full chapter in materials and ships and all of the resources of war they would require to lead their own Splinter Crusade force. But now, their rage and passion, their love of lord and race and tire, meant that they were the hammer of the Emperor, and they indeed walked where other angels feared to tread. When the tank rumbled to the neck of the road which they moved up, the tactical squad broke and scattered. Like shadows they moved, while one always made distraction and drew the eyes of all. But from one to another would the watcher be drawn, as they took it in turns to scuttle, creep, skulk, and then charge out for a second, always confusing the enemy, until they were closer. All the while, the tactical squad's one heavy weapon was firing down on the tank, missiles hitting more often than not, but then usually seeping into a coloured mist around the tank. Little damage. It was piling up, but it was slow going. A glamour of field erected by the twisted power of its dark master. And it was a distraction as well. After the first missiles were on target and failed to cripple the old fossil, the sergeant knew he would have to get up close and personal with it. Hence the firing of their missile launcher, the bolter rounds, the drawing of attention this way and that. All of it was done by his squad, so the sergeant could get into position. He more than managed this, of course. He was an angel of midnight. And thus it was he found himself 4 stories up, looking down at the rear of the tank as it passed beneath him. He only had one shot at this. It had to be good. The sergeant slowly exhaled, raised his bolter up, but it was not the bark of the Emperor's own wrath, the bolter, that finally rang out. Before the sergeant squeezed the trigger on his weapon, he switched it to its secondary mode. For the gun was rare, and although not as old as many, it had an underslung attachment, a single shot of a powerful melter charge. Just the one, for situations just like this. And when his shot flew out and vaporized the air between him and his target, he knew it would run true. The one melter shot slammed into the back of the tank, exactly where he had wanted it to be, and the effect went into its armor and superheated it until it literally melted. Burning liquid metal dropped into the tank and set off a chain reaction that led to it exploding on the spot. The sergeant stepped back from the window as the tank exploded, then returned again to look down at his handiwork. The vehicle was gone, taking over a score of vile scum with it. But now, said scum were nothing more than a milling and confused mass, and the sergeant drew out his chainsword, hit the one chevron ordering his men to attack, then put his foot on the windowsill and stepped out. He fell down amongst the milling crowd of tainted heretics and cut loose. As he did, his men, all 9 of them, appeared out of corners and shadows and alleyways. None would escape their wrath this day. None. The lieutenant held his rage in check, but only barely. He knew it was wrong. He knew he was incorrect, but his eyes told him a different story. Despite the protestations of his mind, his heart rebelled. They were being left to die. He had seen the bloody mess that was his captain, who had returned from his first meeting with the chapter master, the legendary Gabriel Seth. What a possessed madman to beat his new line officer to within an inch of his life. What kind of general would he be to these men? The Primaris that just so happened to have the blood of the angel, his very seed in them. For most, reunification with their designated chapter had been a moment of celebration, of camaraderie, of homecoming. But not so for those Primaris who had been sent to wear the colours of the Flesh Tearers. They had been viewed with suspicion, sneered at openly, or even ignored when they first arrived.
Heard that
Then their captain had been dragged out of his first meeting with the chapter master in a bloody mess.
Don't you worry.
There was real concern amongst the Primaris, and the lieutenant was now seeing all of their fears come true. His captain had been leading from the front and was heavily engaged, so he left his number 2 in charge of the field oversight, the tactical overview. So it was the lieutenant could see the battle progress, could see its ebb and flow, and the Xenos tyrannid filth appeared in numbers far greater than had been projected. Far greater. He had informed his captain, but was met with a snapped answer to inform Central Command, nothing more. And thus the lieutenant had done so, but received no response. Nothing. It had been minutes, and in a battlesphere as complex as this one was turning out to be, even seconds could make all of the difference. His hand hovered over the button that would reissue the message. Everything told him to hammer down that button again and again until his communication was at least confirmed as received. The bugs were not as stupid or animalistic as standard citizenry were told. Not one bit. He knew that they could have disrupted communications. But if he did hammer away at the button, did send the message again and again, then he could be sending it into a room full of laughing firstborn. He could be seen as weak, desperate, unable to hold the line in the face of the enemy without panic. And that would translate to all of his Primaris brethren. Neither option was worthy of him sending it again. But what if they had not received the one message at all? Would he doom his entire company out of hesitation and pride alone? His hand continued to hover for another whole minute. But then the decision was finally taken out of his hand as a new chevron appeared on his screen. At first, he had thought it would be the precursor to a wave of them, but it was only one, no more. The drop pod slammed through the atmosphere and landed directly in front of the main thrust of the enemy, where the lieutenant had stated would be the most hazardous and vulnerable zone of the battle, the crux point. Other Primaris in front of the line looked to the skies, scanning for more pods, but saw nothing. Not until the drop pod opened. Its tentacle-like coverings jettisoning off from well-placed charges on its hull. The ramp slammed down hard, revealing its contents, and each Primaris on that gun line took in a sharp intake of breath in sheer shock and horror. A wave of clawing, chittering and screeching tyrannids hurled themselves forward, crashing towards the drop pod. So many. But inside the drop pod were only 5 Marines. 4 elite First Company veterans, the best the chapter had to provide, the Sanguinary Guard in their golden armor, and the one man none of them had expected to see. For in the midst of the 4 Sanguinary Guard, walking down the drop pod ramp, and then immediately beginning to pick up speed, as he seemed to charge directly into the very heart of this oncoming tsunami of flesh, it was him. It was the chapter master. It was Gabriel Seth himself. He had come personally. And something the lieutenant did not expect then happened. It happened spontaneously. It happened all across the line, and it happened with such speed that he could scarce believe it. For as the chapter master charged headlong into his foes, and began to cut a huge swathe through them, it began. A low rumbling at first, then louder and louder, until it filled every comm signal, every helmet. A bellow of anger, a bellow of rage. As one, the Primaris units across the sector stood and bellowed their rage as they leapt over their defenses, abandoning their Codex-compliant positions. They charged. The lieutenant could not believe his eyes and ears, as over 30 Marines charged as one to save a man who they thought despised them, who they thought had led them into a trap, who they thought would never, ever accept them. But despite it all, there was one thing more powerful than any of that. Any concern, suspicion or doubt. The one and only thing that actually mattered at all. The Primaris saw. Their chapter master was in danger. Their lord was amongst his enemies and in danger of drowning amongst these filth. A fellow space marine, a human, a hero of the Imperium was about to die, unless they acted. And thus it was that the Primaris Marines broke every level of subconscious training they had received from their previous tutors, smashed every tenet and control, allowed the blood to sing in their ears and to guide their very actions. Like sons of Sanguinius, they charged. Gabriel Seth was like a force of nature, his two-handed giant chainsword, Blood Reaver, carving out such a tally of destruction that it was hard to keep up with him. His every movement, his every action, twist or sweep, every single last motion was an attack. He was unstoppable. As the Primaris slammed into the Tyranids trying to encircle the Chapter Master in his guard, they turned the tide very quickly, and in mere moments, Chapter Master, Sanguinary Guard and Primaris Marine were all fighting side by side, shoulder to shoulder, tearing the flesh of the enemies of the Imperium, the enemies of humanity, as one. None who fought that day would forget it. And none of the warriors in the Primaris who saw their Chapter Master in action doubted any more. For he had come. He had come and he had fought for them, with them. He had bled with them, and they had bled for him. He had taught them without sermon, without lecture, but by action, what it was to be a true son of Sanguinius. He had shown them the way. And from that day forward, there would never be any doubt any more. For in that moment, when the blood was up and the foe in number, these men, these Primaris, they had proven that they were not shallow clones or cuckoos in the nest, for they had proven themselves true sons of the angel. They were flesh tearers now, and proud of it. And all due to one man, Gabriel Seth, Chapter Master of the Flesh Tearers. I am a captain, have fought for humanity for centuries, but had never wanted this, had never sought it. With the Tyranids, they killed so many of us on Baal. The flower of the chapters, the vast majority of their successors of the Legion of the Blood, were gone. Yes, we had new blood, new replacements, new Astartes, Primaris, but they were larger, different, from vast stasis crypts. They fought bravely, like sons of the angel. They were faster than us, stronger, so sure of themselves, so effective. At first, I thought they were here to replace us. Shattered as we were, but with the word of the Chapter Master, Dante, and the avenging son of the Emperor, Rabut Gilliman himself to support them. They were blood angels now. But were they the blood angels now? And so it began, but had to be done swiftly. We integrated them, did so as fast as we could. But there was something that came out in the wash, in the observations, in the meetings, in the measuring. They were warriors born, well-equipped, hardened over the duration of a crusade. They were Marines. But they were missing something. They were not fighting at their potential, because they were walking Codex Astartes. They fought like Ultramarines. Not entirely, but far too much. So we taught them. But it was abundantly clear. They could not be given leadership positions in the highest tiers yet. One day, definitely, but not yet. They did not have the experience to command with the new tweaks to their doctrines. They were not yet adept at our way of war. So it was those of us that were left, those with the talent, if not the desire. We were promoted. There were so few of us left, you see, and I could not deny my duty any longer. So Rubrio Messaro became a lieutenant, and swiftly after a captain. I was there when my predecessor was cut down by the most horrific of battles I had ever yet witnessed. And today, I am reminded of it more than any before. Because today is a very special day. As our battle barge slows to approach the station, I am aware that everything will now change again. For with them amongst us, I can do naught but try even harder. None can bear to fail in their presence. But why does my mind wander so? Because I explain to myself, I justify why I, a captain of the blood, am secretly in more than a tiny bit of awe. And I hope it does not show to the men. I was promoted quickly to lieutenant, then a field promotion to captain only a decade later in that fateful event. So I had not been of high station for long, and the chapter had been at constant war, constant crusade, constantly moving, pushing out into the Imperium Nihilus, reclaiming worlds in the name of the Emperor and the Regent. Our own chapter master, Dante, had been named the regent of the entire northern half, the dark half of the Imperium. The pressure I can only imagine. We all now feel it slightly more, though, but not like normal men might. Not to the point where we can be paralyzed or become ill or inadequate. To the point where we all are more aware. No, we set a higher standard. We were the chapter, the Marines, the heralds and representatives of the Regent himself. We were his angels of death. We had to lead the way. Not just to our successors, not just to the greater, wider brethren of all of the chapters in the northern half of the Imperium. To every guardsman, every tank column, every naval formation, every planet, every man, woman and child under our aegis, our protection. We were now a symbol in the north, whereas the Ultramarines and others were the symbol in the southern greater Imperium. And we had to win. Always. Now more than ever. And it could be hard. But we were Astartes. All of us. Old and new. We stepped up. But due to my brevity of tenure, the inevitable had never happened until this day. Until this new briefing, this new quest. For it cannot be named anything other than that. And I am nervous, if that word could actually be attributed to any of my kind. It is what I would call it anyway. But I am also filled with quiet joy. For what we have been tasked to do will require the best out of every one of my men, and me. And their mere presence will bring it in abundance. For on that base is a full squad of them. The legends, the heroes of our chapter. The sanguinary guard. Each one a fabled warrior, the very cream of not only the chapter, but of its most illustrious, most skilled, most powerful veterans. In them the blood runs so pure, the resonance of the angel's soul reflects so brightly. I've only witnessed them in battle but once. The reason for all of my explanation of my unwanted yet meteoric promotion. I had never had them attached to my units before, let alone attached to me. But now we were approaching, but never planning to stop. The Storm Raven and its escorting storm talents were the only things in the void between us and the station. Replacement for losses we had sustained on campaign, prioritized to us due to the import of our mission. But it was the Storm Raven we all watched, even I. All my brethren bar the lieutenants and I had their helms on. They could mask their awe. We could not. Discipline. The Raven lands, they walk down out of it. Each moving so smoothly, they seem more to glide than walk. Yet it is not ephemeral or feminine. It is more like a hovering forwards, not like ghosts, but like that which they are. Beautiful but powerful warrior angels. Their golden armor shines, and their masks, those metal death masks that burn with the light of the Emperor, the light of the angel. They are resplendent. Everything we feel we should all aspire to be. But they are also the most deadly of all of us. The most powerful Astartes the Emperor commands outside of the Grey Knights, some say. And today, I believe it. I believe. And they are here to guard me, to protect me, as captain, both physically, morally, and with the priesthood, spiritually. Their example alone, their presence amongst the men, the army, the company, it will show all of the brethren that we are in the right, that we are righteous, For how could such as they fight for anything other than the most pure of causes, the most noble of quests and goals? And everywhere we go, the men and women of the Imperium, from the meanest hiver to the most exalted planetary governor, will know that they are blessed, for the truest sons of the angel are with them. They stand forward and take their oaths to defend me for the duration of this campaign, and all cheer when it is done. They cheer. Something I have not heard in many a long month and year. Already, their glory, their presence, begins to shine through us all. With them with us, with me, we cannot fail. We cannot. For we go to a crux point in the schemes of time, I am told. One of the great battles that defines the future, the path of the galaxy itself. Not forever, of course, but for a time. A crux point at which the blood angels must be present, or all is lost. Corbulo himself has foreseen it. And now, for the first time since I received these orders, now I feel we may just win. Because the chapter ancient of the Sanguinary Guard has in his hands, towering over all of us, filling us all with even greater pride, he has a sign. He carries a banner from the Arks, sent by the Regent himself. We will go to war under the banner of the chapter of the Blood Angels entire. We will not lose. I have been Voldemort, your faithful servant. Hope you've enjoyed the story so far and will join us on the weekly entries as a result, and will like and subscribe. If you do, then hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. And so, from both myself and Mrs. B, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo. Chronicle of Heroes. From the earliest days of the Imperium, the Blood Angels have fought to defend the Emperor's realm, in spite of the darkness that gnaws at their souls. The sons of Sanguinius have proven themselves true heroes time and again. Even now, as their days darken towards night, they remain a beacon of hope amid a galaxy of war. Millennium 31 to 40, an age of golden glory. A galaxy of sorrows. Corrupted by the dark gods of chaos, the War Master Horus leads fully half the Space Marine legions into damnation. The nascent Imperium is torn asunder by this civil war, which culminates in the Siege of Terra itself. At the battle's climax, the Emperor, Sanguinius and Rogel Dawn teleport aboard the War Master's battle barge, accompanied by their greatest champions. Sanguinius and all but one of his Sanguinary Guard join this attack despite the Primarch's presentiments of doom. Sure enough, the elite Blood Angels are slain one by one, while Sanguinius himself falls in battle with Horus. Though his noble sacrifice makes victory over Horus possible, the angelic Primarch unwittingly triggers a terrible flaw within the gene seed of his legion. This curse will bedevil the Blood Angels forevermore. The Shield of Sanguinius. Tectonic upheavals on the backwater world of Ion Cell 5 trigger a massive Orc war. Dispossessed greenskins flood into space in their billions, led by a bellowing beast known as War Boss Star Smasher. The war overruns the maiden world of Ledrith, sweeps aside the renegade war fleet of Lord Borfajik, and descends upon the Red Haven system. Here it is stopped dead by a combined force of Blood Angels, Astra Militarum, and Knights of House Griffith. The defense is coordinated by the Blood Angels chapter master Leonid Castiveres, and is masterful in its conception and execution. The war rages for many months and several imperial worlds are overrun, yet finally the war spends its fury against the vaunted shield of Sanguinius and is utterly destroyed. A gathering of heroes. A combined force of Blood Angels, Angels in Carmine, and Blood Drinkers engages with traitor forces on the Archaeotech world of Hell's Hollow. Though the cultist hosts are swiftly put to death, the attack comes too late to prevent their completion of a heretic ritual. The veil is pierced, and a tide of demons spills through into the planet's macrocities. The Blood Angels and their brethren react to this new development with typical courage and resolve. The main strength of the strike force is deployed in a series of holding actions, stemming the demonic tide long enough for the Death Company to be hurled against the ritual site itself. Amidst an orgy of violence, the black-armored Battle Brothers slaughter everything in their path, closing the rift at the price of their own lives. Millennium 41, an age of red wrath. Cleansing of the sin of damnation. A space hulk, codenamed Sin of Damnation, drops out of the warp dangerously close to Baal. Strike Force Raphael deploys squads of Terminators via boarding torpedoes, and a vicious battle erupts throughout miles of tangled corridors, chambers, and ducts, as the Blood Angels battle the Hulk's gene-stealer infestation. Death on Kartas. Captain Zoriel leads elements of the Blood Angels' 4th Company to the world of Kartas, there to put an end to localized piracy by a ragtag fleet of renegades. Though the pirate fleet is quickly shattered, their flagship breaks up in the Kartan atmosphere. The ship's warp engines suffer a cascade failure and tears a hole in reality, through which pours a host of coronate demons. The Blood Angels, who have made planfall to check for pirate survivors, find themselves stranded on Kartas surrounded by an ever-growing tide of demons. Though they fight with honor and determination, Sanguinius' scions are soon in danger of being overrun. Their predicament worsens when the mighty bloodthirster Kabanda slays Captain Zoriel in single combat. Just as all seems lost, the Sanguinor appears, plunging like a bolt of golden lightning into the midst of the foe. The angel battles the roaring demon back and forth, finally hurling Kabanda down and banishing his corporeal form back to the warp. Rallying behind the Sanguinor, the last of Zoriel's men cut a path to the warp engine, deactivating it and ending Kartas's nightmare. In the wake of the madness, the Sanguinor disappears without a trace. Blood on the Sand. Rebellion and heresy claims the searing death world of Dakar, and the Blood Angels respond in force. Vicious gunfights rage throughout the subterranean hubs and manufactorums. Meanwhile, the Blood Angels' armor meets the traitor tanks upon Dakar's rad-blasted deserts, capitalizing on their speed and the barrel-like terrain to cut their lumbering enemies to pieces in a series of blistering battles. The Melyaneth Sky War. Captain Metrian is charged with the destruction of Eldari raiders operating from a fortress hidden in the poisonous atmosphere of the gas world Melyaneth. Harnessing the chapter's entire fleet of gunships and combat interceptors, Metrian initiates an unprecedented airborne assault. Storm Ravens jink through the blaze of anti-aircraft fire to disgorge assault squads and Terminators directly onto the floating fortress's docking platforms. This hard-hitting infantry force swiftly secures landing zones for land raiders and predators to arrive via Thunderhawk transports. As the battle rages through the fortress's hangars and service shafts, the overwhelming firepower and determination of the Blood Angels soon begins to tell. Realizing the hopelessness of their situation, the Eldari pirates abandon their fortress, though not before they have sabotaged its gravity nullifiers. The Blood Angels are forced to beat a desperate retreat as the fortress is sucked into Malinus' hungry maw. Only the incredible skill of the Blood Angels' gunship pilots, who fearlessly plunge their craft into the deepening gravity well to rescue their blood brothers, prevents the victory from becoming a devastating defeat. The Weld Engine. The Blood Angels' 2nd and 4th companies are dispatched to the Vida sector to assess against the threat of the Necron World Engine. Following the sacrifice, Blood Angels of the 2nd Company are permanently assigned to stand guard over the memorial. Death of Antax. Strike Force Aphael battles War Gutstomper on the Forge World of Antax. The battle looks likely to go against the Blood Angels until they unleash the fury of their Death Company, led into battle by the ancient Death Company dreadnought Moriah. Captain Aphael and his surviving battle brothers crush the reeling War Gutstomper, ending the threat to Antax amid fire and blood. The Second War for Armageddon. War Gazkul descends upon the hive world of Armageddon. The Blood Angels are one of 3 Space Marine chapters to respond. Such is Commander Dante's reputation that Tushan of the Salamanders and Marneus Calgar of the Ultramarines cede overall command to him. Fighting is fierce in and around the high cities, with the determination of the defenders matched only by the unremitting battle lust of the Orcs. The Blood Angels bear the brunt of the close-quarter fighting. The tactical maneuverability of the Blood Angels proves to be crucial in the later stages of the campaign. The 3rd Company, under the command of the newly promoted Captain Erasmus Tycho, forms the heart of an armoured spearhead that cripples the chief Orc supply lines, leaving the Orc mech boys without the necessary gubbins and gears to keep their stompers, Gorkanauts and Morkanauts fully operational. With its heavy guns thus neutralized, the war is finally broken before the towering walls of Tartarus Hive, where Dante and Tushan famously fight side by side against Gazgul's bodyguard. What price victory? Captain Castigon leads Strike Force Nobilitas into battle against the Drukhari on Tolos. Amidst the ruins of the planet's agriplexes, the Blood Angels witness the horrors inflicted by the cruel Xenos upon the world's populace. So repugnant is the butchery that Castigon and his warriors lose their grip upon their inner fury. The red whirlwind of destruction they visit upon the Drukhari leaves no foe standing. Yet still, the Blood Angels face shameful censure in the battle's wake, for a victory won in the grip of the floor is no victory at all. The Black Fang Crusade. Judging that the Orc strongholds in the Black Fang system have defied the Imperium for too long, Dante mobilizes his entire chapter. They fight a year-long campaign that not only drives the Orcs from the 12 worlds of Black Fang, but also from 2 neighboring systems. Beheading the Serpent. Captain Tycho's third company is one of many Space Marine strike forces that responds to the threat of High Fleet Yomandan. Though Tycho claims several crucial victories, so reckless are his tactics that fears for his sanity arrives. The Third War for Armageddon. Gazgul returns to the arid world of Armageddon at the head of another, vaster war. Over 24 Space Marine chapters respond this time. Adeptus Astartes from across the galaxy gather to deny the Beast of Armageddon his victory. Though the Blood Angels are already hard-pressed battling the emergent threat of High Fleet Leviathan, Captain Tycho leads a force to Armageddon's aid. The consequences of this decision will prove dire indeed, yet honor demands that the Blood Angels do no less. The Shield of Baal. News reaches Baal that the worlds comprising the Kryptian Shield, intended to hold back the might of High Fleet Leviathan, are overrun. Knowing that the consumption of the Kryptos system would open the floodgates for an unstoppable Tyranid invasion of Baal, Commander Dante takes action. At the head of a mighty strike force that comprises the first and second companies of the Blood Angels, Brother Corbulo, Brother Carlane, Chief Librarian Mephiston, and the bulk of Gabriel Seth's flesh tearers, Dante strikes out for the Kryptos system. This mighty force reaches the Kryptos system in time to aid the last hard-pressed Imperial defenders and avert complete catastrophe. Yet the war that follows is unremittingly savage, with both the Imperial and Xenos forces suffering rapidly escalating casualties. The Blood Angels are eventually forced to unleash an ancient weapon of mysterious provenance to annihilate an entire world of the Kryptos system and use its debris to gut the onrushing Splinter Fleet. Showing his wisdom, Dante accepts that the Tyranids have been slowed but not stopped. The Blood Angels commander orders the return to Baal. His chapter will fight for its survival upon the worlds of its birth. Angel's Blade. Even as their forces make warp for Baal, further ill tidings reach Commander Dante and his lieutenants. Slipping past the defences around the Cadian Gate, a raiding force of Black Legion, Word-Bearers and Crimson Slaughter Chaos Space Marines have struck at the Diamore system. On a bound to lend their strength to fight against these traitors, the Blood Angels dispatch forces they can ill afford, under 1st Captain Carlane and 2nd Captain Aphael, to aid the Imperial war effort. Those noble heroes find themselves fighting a diabolical plan to shatter a planet-sized cage within which ancient demonic entities are trapped, seizing victory by only the narrowest of margins. Meanwhile, Dante and the remainder of his battle brothers press on to Baal to strengthen its defenses. Millennium 41, an age of black despair. The tendril uncoils. The Baal system is reinforced like never before. Answering Commander Dante's call, one successor chapter after another arrives to lend much, if not all, of their strength to their primogenitors. Slab-sided defences are raised upon the blasted sands of Baal Prime and Secundus, and even the fortress monastery of the Arx Angelicum on Baal itself. Fleets of cruisers and battle barges gather in the void around Baal and its moons, their combined might enough to crush star systems and end worlds. Still, as deep void auspic screens turn blood red with contact runes, and a 10,000-mile-wide tidal wave of chitin and flesh surges into the Baal system, it seems unlikely that it will be enough. Desperate measures. With the Tyranids closing in, Commander Dante and his closest lieutenants authorize deeds that would have been unthinkable in brighter days. The Blood Angels' precious gene seed reserves are removed from their storage crypts, packed carefully for transit under the watchful eyes of sanguinary priests, then sent away on a swift ship with a hand-picked complement of guards. At the same time, millennia of tradition are cast aside, as Blood Angels' gunships gather every viable aspirant they can from amongst the nomadic tribes of Baal Prime and Secundus. These youths are armed and then ferried to the Arx Angelicum. There they form defense garrisons, whose strength will augment that of Sanguinius' sons. At least 40,000 wide-eyed youths are gathered in this way, and told that any who survive the oncoming battle will surely prove their worthiness to join the chapter's ranks. Of the remaining tribesmen, little is said. Given what extra weapons and rations the Blood Angels can spare, they are left to hide or stand as they see fit. Any Tyranids they kill will be fewer monstrosities to beset the Blood Angels and their successors, but the tribesmen are not expected to weather the horrors that follow.
The battle begins. Not hitting right on this.
Unwilling to cede Void supremacy to the Tyranids without a fight, Commander Dante orders his naval vessels to strike at the enemy and slow their advance. Across 100 fronts, the red-armored void craft of the Blood Angels and their successors strikes at the fleshy Tyranid hive ships. Lances and gun decks split the darkness with their fury. Ruptured bioships tumble away, slicks of ichor spilling from their sundered innards to freeze in the merciless void. Dozens of Tyranid ships are butchered, hundreds of thousands of warrior organisms slain before they ever see the irradiated sands of Baal. Still, the Blood Angels are driven back, every victory carrying its own butcher's bill and flaming hulks and dead battle brothers. Soon enough, the Void War becomes unsustainable, as more and more Tyranids flow from the darkness in squamous waves. With their surviving craft forced to fall back and harass the Hive Fleet's flanks, the Blood Angels now face the full fury of the Tyranid invasion. On Baal Prime and Baal Secundus, aircraft-sized spores darken the skies in their millions. The shadow in the warp settles like a shroud, choking off any further hope of reinforcement. The sons of Sanguinius stand alone. Death from above. Tyranids pour from the skies in ever-increasing numbers. Their spores slam down like hellish seed pods to spill ravenous waves of war beasts directly into battle. Orbital lasers and hurtling gunships take a mighty toll upon the Xenos, in some regions wreaking such carnage the purple ichor falls like storm rain across the defenders below. Yet still the Tyranid waves come on. Tyrannocytes falling thicker and thicker, while gargoyles and harpies swoop between them, spitting acidic gruel that sends Blood Angels' aircraft spiraling down in flames. On Baal and Baal Secundus, rippling tides of warrior organisms surge onto the defenders' guns and are shredded amid storms of fire. Their corpses pile up in hideous drifts, yet still they press forward foot by foot. On Baal Prime, the situation is worse still, the Tyranids hurling overwhelming forces into battle. Angel's Fall becomes a blood-drenched altar to the gods of battle, its defenders massacred by an avalanche of chitinous bodies and razored talons. Gabriel Seth and his berserk flesh terrors lead the counterattack, tearing the heart from one Tyranid swarm after another. But the victories do not come without cost. Driven back. For weeks, the fighting rages on. The Tyranid body count spirals upwards with breathtaking speed. Dante's warriors felling hundreds of Xenos for every one of their own that falls. Yet fall the sons of Sanguinius do, as the defense lines are breached and overwhelmed one after another. At last, the defenders stand defiant with the Arx Angelicum's final fortifications. Still, the Tyranids fall from the skies. Still, the slaughter continues. Secundus defiant. On Baal Secundus, the Carmine blades hold firm in the face of each Tyranid attack. Feet planted, bolters roaring, they hold Baal's astropathic relay against impossible odds, bringing honor to their names with each bloody day that dawns. Last stand. The greatest Tyranid wave yet slams into the defences of the Arx Angelicum and breaches them. 3 successor chapter masters fall in the battle of the Dome of Angels alone. Bodies pile high amidst the sundered defences. Still, the defenders fight on, even throwing open the gates of the Tower of Amareo and letting the captives loose. If the Blood Angels are to die, they will do so in battle and on their own terms. The storm breaks. The Great Rift tears across the galaxy. Warp storms spill from its howling war, engulfing the war-torn worlds of the Baal system in empiric insanity. The Tyranids are cut off from their fleet, while on Baal Prime the sudden fury of a massive demonic incursion is unleashed. Perhaps it is hours that pass, or perhaps days. Perhaps it is years. Amidst the reality-bending energies of the warp, Sanguinius' sons and the beasts of High Fleet Leviathan fight on towards mutual annihilation. Then, at last, the stars emerge again, revealing not a single bioship. Where the Xenos craft had gone, none can say, but the Tyranid ground force reels in confusion. A new fleet is revealed in their place. The Indomitus Crusade has arrived. Reboot Gilliman guided to Baal by the signal of its astropathic relay. With a word, he unleashes his fury. Angels and demons. The salvation of Baal does not come quickly or without cost, even as Gulliman's forces rain down to relieve the siege of the Arx Angelicum, even as they join forces with the surviving sons of Sanguinius and fight to purge Baal and its moons of Xenos. Still, more Imperial
rock
lives
song
are
about not
lost.
putting your penis in her, okay.
Yet hopeless defeat has become a glorious victory against the odds. Meanwhile, as certain grim secrets of the Blood Angels are laid bare to the eyes of the Ultramarines Primarch, he chooses to keep his own counsel, and leaves such things unspoken. Baal and Baal Secundus are cleansed of Tyranids before a month is out. The slaughter is spearheaded by Primaris Space Marines clad in the panoply of the Blood Angels and their successors. On Baal Prime, no such martial efforts are required. The moon has been utterly scoured of life, both Imperial and Tyranid. Though Gabriel Seth and his surviving flesh tearers escaped the unnatural cataclysm, the only sign of life that remains on Baal Prime is the immense cornate sigil of Kabanda, wrought in Tyranid skulls piled mountainously high and dominating much of the moon's southern hemisphere. Millennium 41, an age of crimson dawn. Hope from horror. In the wake of Leviathan's defeat, the Blood Angels begin to rebuild. Their gene seed stocks are recalled, taking their rightful place beneath the rising arches of the restored Arx Angelicum. The several thousand grizzled aspirants who survived the siege are all inducted, and those that endure are funneled into the outsized scout companies authorized by Commander Dante for his chapter and their successors. The ranks are further bolstered by a huge influx of Primaris Space Marines, unfrozen from the vaults of the Tsar Quasitor, or produced upon Baal itself using the newly installed mechanisms brought by Archmagos Kor. With Commander Dante declared Regent of the Imperium Nihilus by Gulliman, the Blood Angels and their successors are soon ready to rejoin the war for the Emperor's realm. It is well that they are, for the fight has become more desperate than ever before. The galaxy screams. Even as rebuilding efforts continue on Baal, scattered astropathic messages filter in from the void. Some are little more than formless nightmares, so twisted that they are shorn of meaning. Others are the death screams of worlds, violent enough to burn out the receiving astropath's minds, but containing no actionable information. However, many are clear enough to be understood, especially those sent from neighboring systems within the Red Scar. Commander Dante assembles multiple strike forces from amongst his chapter's newly bolstered ranks, sending the Blood Angels out into the void as a resurgent force for good. The relief of Lestranza. Strike Force Aphoriel braves a perilous leap through the warp, safely reaching the Pendrak system. They come in answer to a distress call from the system's capital world, Lestranza, which they find beset. Regiments of turncoat Imperial Guard have perpetrated a cannibalistic rampage across Lestranza's southern continental landmass, and are close to overrunning the defences of the planet's northern hives. Demons of Khorne fight alongside the feral traitors, and wherever they charge into battle, no Imperial defence can stand. Newly appointed Captain Aphoriel leads the fight to relieve the Loyalists, orchestrating a masterful campaign of rapid strike warfare with Primaris Blood Angels at its heart. Inceptor squads plunge from the upper atmosphere to neutralize the traitors' southern polar ritual sites and cut off their supply of demonic reinforcements. Meanwhile, forces of intercessors, tactical squads, hellblasters and devastators deploy by drop pod and gunship to execute the traitor leadership cadres wherever they are found. Valkyries from the skies, while below spearheads of repulsors and land raiders execute devastating armored charges into enemies' rear lines. Finally, after 3 weeks of unrelenting carnage, the morale of the traitors collapses, and they are crushed between the Blood Angels at their backs and resurgent loyalists to their fore. The Golden Host. Elements of the Blood Angels and the Carmine Blades join the crusade to reclaim the Dormet system from the grip of the Black Legion. While the Carmine Blades Reaver squads excel in the vicious shadow war of Heddoth, and the charge of the Death Company and Talon 44th Armoured carries victory on Zongal, a Black Legion counterattack on the feudal world of Tydor threatens to see the Blood Angels overwhelmed. As Dante and Astrath fight back to back amidst the sanguinary guard, a golden figure plunges from the heavens to join the battle. The Sanguinor has come. Led by this trio of angelic heroes, the Blood Angels hurl back their attackers, driving the last of the heretic Astartes over the cliffs of Fellhaven into the darkness below. Bloody Retribution. Hurled across the void of an empiric convulsion, a Tau colonization fleet begins claiming worlds within the Red Scar. Their efforts are brought to a sudden, violent halt by strike forces of Blood Angels, Fresh Terrors, and the Angel Sanguine. Planets of Desandri and Grendel's Reach are swiftly reclaimed, and the war spills into the Seven Sun system. From beyond the veil. Strike Force Mephiston is lost to the warp while attempting a daring crossing of the Karcharak's Tempest to reach the beset world of Ramengal. The morning bells tolled on Baal proved to be premature, as a full year after their disappearance, Mephiston's force bursts back into reality and fall upon Ramengal, annihilating the demonic pleasure cults that have conquered its cities. The Kovian Incident. Fascinated by the Primaris Space Marines, or more specifically, their potential to advance his research into a cure for the flaw, Brother Corbulo makes it his business to accompany them into battle whenever he can. Thus Corbulo is on hand during the final attack on the Alpha Legion's fortress of Lies on Kovan. Spearheaded by Vindicators and Repulsors, the Blood Angels' attack breaches the immense fortification, allowing squads of intercessors to pour inside. Yet the Alpha Legionnaires draw out the fight, baiting their enemies and striking to wound and goad the Primaris Blood Angels wherever possible. Though victory is eventually secured, the violence unleashed by several of the Primaris brothers to achieve it is extreme, with traitors torn limb from limb. No official censure is applied to the battle brothers in question, but Corbulo seeks audience with Dante shortly afterwards. His deep disquiet is evident. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Voldemort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the important factions, forces, and faces of the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. If you are a regular gentle listener, then I would ask that you check that you are still subscribed and have notifications on. If not, then do consider subscribing, as then you will not miss out on ongoing narratives, if that sort of thing appeals to you. Now, I have to inform you immediately that I will be away this week. Well, technically from yesterday. Hence the smaller entries from today through to my return. I have snacks set up for Monday and Wednesday, but nothing more than that at the present. Alas, the recent events have been enervating, and had put a massive hole in my output. So I'm taking a week off to visit family and regain my mojo, so to put it. All things being equal, on my return, I should be able to get some good long entries out on some of the more interesting segments of the setting, so do please bear with me. And today, we are to deal with a tragic tale indeed, and one that touches very close to my own heart, for I consider myself a true son of the angel, a sanguineous. And thus, the tale of Captain Erasmus Tycho is a dark one indeed. For each and every blood angel, and all of those within their successor chapters secretly hold this one cautionary tale as their most harrowing. For Tycho was indeed the best of the best, seemingly anointed and the future of the chapter. Yet even he was not proof from the dangers of the curse that runs through each of their veins and lurks within the shadows of their souls. Now, let us hear the tragic tale of Captain Erasmus Tycho. And so, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote Captain Erasmus Tycho, the Fallen Star. No matter how many imperial lives our actions save, how many worlds we rescue from the clutches of monsters, and how much selfless glory we cover ourselves in from one war zone to the next, none of it changes the bleak truth that we are cursed.
Yeah.
And when the black tide rises and drowns all that we are, does the legacy we leave behind excuse the monsters we become? Does it make our sacrifice worthwhile, as we are told? Or is it all swept away, rendered meaningless by the same bloody flood that takes our sanity?
Oh, I broke his finger off.
I just do not know. Captain Erasmus Tycho.
I broke his finger.
Brother Captain Erasmus Tycho was once the greatest strike leader the Blood Angels had ever known, rumoured to be Dante's protégé and chosen successor. Now he stands as a grim reminder that even the chapter's brightest and best are not safe from the clutches of the Black Rage. Tycho took command of the Blood Angels' 3rd Company when his predecessor was slain during the Second War for Armageddon. The former sergeant swiftly proved his mettle, orchestrating the rout of Boss Gracker's speed freaks and recapturing key defensive positions all along the River Charon. Heartened by their successes, the 3rd Company pushed on, striking at the Orc supplies from Armageddon Prime. It was on such a mission that Tycho and his company were ambushed. Though the Blood Angels triumphed, their captain fell victim to an Orc weirdboy's psychic assault early in the battle and was left for dead. Through luck or sheer belligerence, Tycho survived, but the after effects of the terrible psychic onslaught had paralyzed half of his face, freezing it forever in a rictus grin. Tycho's obsession with fine aesthetic taste and beauty was as great as that of any other Blood Angel, and to him, such a fate was worse than death itself. So it was that bitterness and rage began to creep into Tycho's once pure heart, opening the door to the pent-up anger that lay at the heart of Tycho's very being. Unable to bear the pitiful looks of his battle brothers, Tycho ordered the chapter's most revered artificer to forge a mask to cover his disfigurement. This simple act seemed to grant Tycho a measure of peace, and for a time he regained his old composure. For the remainder of the Armageddon campaign, the Blood Angels' Third Company stood in the thick of the fighting, Tycho directing their efforts as he had in the early stages, though none could deny that an increased fervour stole over the captain whenever he tasted the tang of orc blood upon the air. In the wake of that great campaign, it swiftly became apparent that all was not right with Tycho. No longer could he relax in the hallowed halls of the chapter's fortress, for its beauty served to remind him of his own mutilation. Dante reluctantly assigned Tycho to permanent battle duty, yet even there he was more violent of temperament and attitude, and his tactics became audacious to the point of foolhardiness. Finally, when Ghazghkull returned to Armageddon, and Tycho revisited the war that had seen him mutilated so many years before, his mind snapped. Lost in the depths of rage, the captain took his place in the Death Company. At the head of a seething mass of raving, delusional battle brothers, Tycho led the assault upon the breach at Hive Tempestora. Though his charge carried the day, and though the ferocity of his assault has since become legend, the captain fell at the last, on the planet where perhaps he should have perished long before. End quote. Alas, as I'm rushing to try to get all of this done before I leave, and also because I honestly could wax on lyrical for a very long time, but it wouldn't actually add anything to your knowledge of the background. There is not much else to be said about the great son of the angel, and thus I shall say goodbye. I have been Voldemort, your faithful servant. I hope you've enjoyed this brief introduction to Captain Erasmus Tycho. If so, then please do consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. If you see the worth in what we are doing, then do also consider joining our Patreon, or giving the video a share if that is beyond your present scope. It would be a great boon, but rest assured, I would say a lot of my entries are very long indeed. So do please forgive me this tiny break. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.
Ta-da!
The Storm Raven hurtled through the skies towards its target like a lightning bolt, through fields of fire, flak and small arms aimed up at it. Most was evaded by the furious action of the incredibly skilled pilot. He was used to the task, delivering his fallen brothers to the very center of the fray. It's very hard. But he always kept the comms from the central section turned off. On his first drop, he had kept them on, but the lesson hadn't been learned. Oh, how it had been learned. For he had heard what they said. He heard what was being spat at them by the legendary Lemartes, guardian of the lost. And on that day, he near lost the command of his faculties. He nearly fell into the chasm that was the rage.